Hello. Welcome back. Let's talk about episode 2 of the Vampire Lestat. So this episode we're heading to Toledo, Ohio. It looks like every episode of the season is going to be in a different city along their concert tour, right? The Vampire Lestat on tour across America, it seems. And so that's where we're heading out. Last time we were at Detroit. And this is the episode where we're going to get a little bit more of the backstory of what made Lestat. But for, we're going to get, some details about his relationship with his mother pretty much. But we start off kind of like Lestat kind of trying to justify or at least explain to the audience, who, by the way, is the person who bought the record collection at the auction, right? That's who he's talking to on here, and also kind of meta way, like to the audience as well that's watching the show. But so he's saying some awkward lines here about how trying to ease people into the idea of him and his mother in a sort of relationship here, right? It's okay, it's all right. You've seen episode 1, the ending was a bit of a shocker, right? You've stormed you weathered the Freudian storms, he says. And stuff like boat is the penis and the ocean is his mother's vagina. Right. So he's trying to explain that in those terms and Oedipus terms, at Epiphany. But really, you got to get to know their relationship before all this, right? That's how we can better understand the context of why they're so attached to each other, right? And then and later on in the episode, he kind of tries to conclude the justification, which we'll get to in a second, but or in a minutes. But here we have a flashback to what life was like before he was a vampire. Here, showcasing that he does have that stutter that Daniel Malloy was pestering him about last episode. And his mother Gabriella here. And both him and Gabriella are kind of the outcasts of the family, right? And definitely Gabriella is a strong-willed person, and she has a strong personality here, but obviously is not being taken seriously and is not feels not very empowered at all here in the family. Definitely during this time period, and definitely during this type of family who is very patriarchal, it seems, and even some of her sons, despise her and stuff. But she doesn't really. She stands up for herself in a bit by kind of lashing out at them in Italian, really, and that kind of, and calling them cabbages and stuff. And so she gets her own little moments of liberty in her mind, at least, reading her books, and in the book, and actually she's kind of like the intellectual of the family, really. And I think in this adaptation they're making her actually full-blown Italian. And in the books I read the first few chapters so far, and pretty much up to the point where Lestat gets bitten and becomes a vampire. And I think the mother, she's actually called Gabrielle, not Gabriella, and she has visited and lived in Italy before, in London and other places. But I think, especially her accent here, they're making her out to be actually Italian. Kind of sets her apart from the rest of the family, and but you can see the similarities between her and Lestat here, especially some of her outbursts here, right? Her passion here, the very passionate retorts she has that are reminiscent of Lestat. like here, right? The grimaces, her reactions reminds you of that. Um, and that's so we're starting to see like that's where he gets a lot of himself from his mother there. And so this scene we also saw a little bit of in little snippets last episode. It turns out it's just Lestat stabbing one of his brothers. And while his mother reads the book, he mentions she has like a sort of cold beauty that he admires, right? And now we get him all grown. I believe he's like 30 in this adaptation here. In the books, I believe he's like 20 or something. But we can see that he has this sensitive character here of Lestat here. A young Lestat comparative to what we know of now. But this is where he kind of like feels like he has to prove himself to his family, right? Because now his family is kind of like, pretty well-off family. They own this land here, right? And these, I believe, are the serfs who are complaining about wolves, and they got to get rid of the wolves because the wolves are killing their livestock and probably people as well. And so this is where Gabrielle is like, you gotta man up pretty much to the family, showcase that you have something to offer, be a man, must be a man, she says. And that's almost like a cue for Lestat here to step up here, and he's gonna prove to, I think mostly his mother, that he can, he can be a man and be and also stand apart and from the rest, and not just be wither away into becoming just like his brothers and father. And so this scene was it was built up a lot, and I feel like it's not quite as exciting as I was expecting. Feels like maybe they were limited a little bit in the budget department here, because in the book he has like a flail, he's like swinging it around, and like his horse gets attacked, and it's like this whole big thing, and I think he kind of even alludes to it right in the previous episode about how he's like, oh, this whole moment where he kills these wolves is what defined him for a bit. So maybe they were downplaying it on purpose. But yeah, it's just we really only get one shot of the wolf here attacking. And apparently he kills 8 of them or something, right? How many he kills? He kills a bunch. And again, they kind of truncate some of the scene from the book, and they kind of mash a couple different scenes here that gets a little bit even more awkward here. Especially the servant is feeling a little uncomfortable here. So first they kind of connect on the idea of oh, they're gonna kill the family. He has these fantasies of when he was killing the wolves, he's like, oh, I was imagining killing my father and brothers, and and that's something that they kind of connect with, because they hate them, but they both hate them equally almost. But then she comes in with this story of her fantasies, oh, I imagine stripping and bathing in the river or whatever, and then going to town and sleeping with whatever man she finds and stuff. And so then it's kind of some of this horror connecting to horror and lust and gore, which is what is, I guess, appropriate for the show. The idea of her cleaning his wounds, something again kind of reminiscent of what we saw in the first episode, and then connect that to the sensual touch, to also some kind of eroticism here between the son and the mother. But it's kind of she's kind of expressing how these ideas that she wants, these fantasies, kind of represent her being her like an independent, person apart from anybody else, not being owned by her husband or controlled by her sons or whatever. And they find that connection here, like, and I think that's the first moment where they really like see each other for who they are in a way. Like they reveal themselves, Lestat as the wolf killer, and Gabrielle like the liberated woman in a way, right? And then we flash back to the present. But again, great performance here from Sam Reid here. I think they did also a good job of casting the mother here, Jennifer L.A. Was that how you pronounce it? Jennifer L. Who, by the way, she was in the BBC Pride and Prejudice, which I recently saw, coincidentally. Probably most well known from there, but she does really good with this period piece stuff. Yeah, I think overall, like the only thing is the accents, like so maybe like I think she's doing more of an Italian accent here than French. Maybe a little bit too forced, and that's something that this whole sequence here maybe not as strong because of some of the accent work here, and it's something, of course, Lestat has always had that accent in the show, but there are scenes in like the previous season, the moment where we see him and Armand, and also those flashbacks with him and Nikki, they're actually talking French. So like I feel like they could have, this season, I feel like they're playing a little safer, than the last two seasons, again, to kind of attract a new audience, I imagine. And so this, I think, could have worked out better if it was subtitled, have the actors, even if they don't know the language natively, they can still rehearse the scenes, right, and just know those lines. So that's one little thing that maybe could have been better here, because I do feel like, even like Gabriella feels like maybe a little bit too forced, her accent here, and I think it works better in the modern times. I think in the modern times the performance is a little better, a little more subtle, of course. So we go back to the present and kind of just also, again, demonstrating that really the show is going to spend, going back and forth between past and present. In the book, I know that it's mostly set in the past, kind of like showcasing Lestat's development, and it only like really has the beginning and a bookend of the present Rockstar scenario that then leads into Queens of the Damned, which I believe is more about the present. Or I think it's actually more about Akasha, but either way, like I think what they're doing is they're probably can combine both books into this season. Because they want to include the characters from the previous seasons, Louis and Daniel and stuff, who I don't think appear in the Vampire Lestat book. By the way, we do get Daniel here in the shower this time. I feel like they're gonna show a different character in the shower of this bus shower each episode. Like it would make sense. Like each episode would have a different band member. Maybe Christine, the lawyer, or maybe Dr. Farid here will have their turn. That'd be fun. And so yeah, so then we get the sequence here where, you know, they're like, the band members like, whoa, like, can't believe you didn't tell us about you being a vampire. And and then we get the, you know, it's really revealed here that it was Gabrielle who brought Lestat back to the tour here, and she's going by Sophia, you know, and they have to craft this story, really, we'll see, for like, you know, how they know each other and everything, because they're gonna keep their secrets, but it's still a little weird here, these lustful looks here they're giving each other here, but like, still, like, I cannot not like Lestat, you know. He has a charming way, even though he's a weird incestuous vampire. This opening sequence, this opening credits, which I haven't talked about yet, I think it does a good job. I like it. It really gets you in the mood, you know. Like, you know, I cannot not love Lestat here. So then he explains what's going on. Daniel reveals himself to be vampire as well, and Larry here is the one who's like the straight edge character, right? So he's the most like morally, most moral of the characters, and he decides to, you know, he's also a bit of a Karen, right? He's also thinking about calling the cops here, which Lestat warns him against, you know, and he quits, you know, but I think it's just temporary, right? Even Lestat's like, he's like, hey, like, you are the best musician here besides me. And so I feel he's going to come back, you know, but he has to take a breather, you know. He also demonstrates, Lestat demonstrates how he can read minds here. And like, even though they're not saying anything, like they're not saying that they want to stay, he can be like, yeah, I can tell that they want to stay because I can tell you what they're thinking. And very interesting stuff here. Also, I think this reveals what I was suspecting last episode, that the Salamander character is interested in Lestat. Lestat says that, like, he makes it a rule not to sleep with his band members, you know. And so it kind of implying that, like, the Salamander, that's his name, right, was thinking about fucking Lestat, yeah, you know, in his mind there. So right, right, and also, okay, so then also, like, in the books, like, from what I've read so far, like, Lestat is kind of like, trying to show that he's not that monstrous, you know. He's not like, he only kills people who deserve to be killed, right? But I feel like they're painting him out to be a little bit more morally gray here. In this one, he mentions, like, they're afraid that he's gonna kill people, not, you know, like, willy-nilly, but he's kind of simmering things down. It's like, no, it's not like that. And then he mentions that he mostly gets his blood from a blood farm, which was alluded to in previous seasons. It kind of explains that, like, basically people come and donate their blood to the blood farm, so it's all, like, ethical and everything. I would like to see what that looks like. Maybe we'll get a peek at that. But as we see, you know, he's not like super goody two shoes either, but he's trying to, like, calm them down. And we'll see how they'll react going forward. So now, you know, they're doing their sound checks. They're like, now Lestat and Mother are gonna have a little bit of bonding time. And this is where, like, they're trying to, like, formulate the idea of, like, okay, like, where they pretend to meet. They met like some kind of carnival or something, or in Italy, and to make sure they don't make things too awkward by revealing the truth that they're mother, fledgling, and lover. But they also are kind of this. They also want to establish some boundaries here again. Like maybe let's not be sleeping with each other right now, and so that's kind of what they're establishing here. And also just some fun visual gags here of the vampire bullying this robot, food delivery robot, which is kind of funny. Just again establishing that like this is the modern times, we are in the present times. These food delivery things that we see in big cities, and also like it's also like I know that in the books, like Gabriella is kind of like not very much of a fan of humanity, unlike Lestat, who's very admires like the beauty of humanity, while Gabriella kind of is like, would rather spend time in the woods or whatever. And like she even mentions here that she wasn't actually in Chicago last time. She mentioned she was actually like in Iceland, I think. And she said she was glamping, so they're kind of like somewhat keeping that part of her character, but kind of, adapting it to the modern times. And so I guess by glamping, that just means that it's like just a fancier type of camping, probably has like a portable Wi-Fi hotspot or something so she can text Lestat, and so so that's interesting. Like she still, prefers to be more distant from humanity, and maybe only visits every once in a while. And he even says like they haven't talked in 2 centuries, or in a century. They only like have met twice in a century, So so this is interesting. And so then they decide, to go hunt. We got these businessmen who are celebrating their business deal, and this is a cool little sequence here. Again, somewhat showing the limited budget, perhaps, but also like creatively done really well, I think, because we don't see them like floating in the air. Like in a wide shot, we see a reflection of them floating here, which is actually pretty cool. It could be easily missed though, but we do see the reflection here, and I like it. I like it. And we a little bit of the foreground here, and then they go to the strip club where they're gonna end their hunt there. And what's interesting here is that he sees other muses, I guess, just other vampire presence here. This guy, says, "Are you a good boy?" So, he kind of like is thinking about what Baby Jenks was saying, right? So last time, remember Baby Jenks? She was all high on her drugs, and Lestat fed on her, and then while she was like in the middle, like in between life and death, Lestat saw her ghost or whatever, her soul, and she warned him that there were vampires coming after him. So he's thinking like, oh, like this could be one of these vampires. Of course, we already saw the Fang Gang last time. This kind of showcases that there's more vampires just hanging out and about. And we also see Rashid here as well. I think earlier on here. See, we see here Rashid just having some bacon. So, of course, he works with Tab Mask. We're going to see him a little later. But this seems to be a spot where either vampires or affiliated or adjacent organizations or people hang out as well. It would make sense that anywhere where there's alcohol there would be vampires hanging out, right? Much more easy prey, right? And this is a funny scene here where this guy's like, "Oh yeah, I know this Italian spot, you know," and she's like, "Oh, does it have spaghetti?" Which is just a funny little thing. Of course, she's pretty sure she's Italian here, or either that or a big Italian file, big fan of Italy. And so later we'll see that restaurant. But anyways, she's able to like kind of use her powers to like get him to choke on some food there or something. We see one of the workers here trying to do a Heimlich maneuver, I imagine, in the background. But interesting. She says that this person, I think she's referencing this girl she's kissing, that maybe she could be potential vampire in the future or something, right? She says that she's like predatory or something, naturally predatory or something. And she gave her some money. Is she like kind of like with her telepathic powers, maybe manipulating her into like getting the prey to soften up for them to eat later? I don't know. That's something like that. She's or at least she's admiring the stripper for being predatory, like a vampire. And yeah, so you know, it's another one of those strip club scenes, which I suspect might be a little bit more revealing in the uncut version. I think they'll probably have an uncut version like they did with the other seasons, so there probably more to see here in the future versions. But I know this is like, you know, supposed to show the human world, right? But because, you know, this is a show that's like celebrating gay vampires, especially first two seasons, right? Or just like, you know, fluid vampire, fluid identities, really. I would like to see a little more diverse scenes, like or strip shows. Like, imagine like having a juxtaposition with the vampire world, and like maybe there's a vampire club that is more inclusive to different bodies and different genders, not just like typical women stripping here. Like, you know, there's the theater of vampires. What if we saw burlesque de vampires, you know, something like that. And you know, and there does exist like these pop-up strip shows that have more gender inclusive and queer inclusive performers. And so I don't know, something that I think it would be nice to see in represented on screen, especially in a show like this. But anyway, so then that's the scene where they find their prey. Now they follow their prey to the motel here. And what's interesting here is that they overhear that like he's actually talking to his wife and kids here. And so it kind of like almost kind of indicates, maybe are they reluctant to feed? Is Lestat a bit reluctant to hunt now because he hears that this victim has a family? We don't see the aftermath. It cuts away, so we don't see them ever feeding. She, of course, is very eager to feed. She has just taken a sip from Lestat, and they talk about sex here, about how as a rock star, of course, Lestat has a lot of sex, but of course, it's not as good as feeding the blood. You know, that's the top, as we discussed, and as he, you know, listed out last episode. You know, sex is number 4. Number 1 is drinking the blood. You know, the kill. That's the top vampire priority on the list of pleasures, you know. And then, you know, and of course they kind of were saying how like maybe earlier on like they shouldn't, you know, they shouldn't sleep with each other, but then here she's actually drinking from him. So like if drinking the blood is even more intimate in a way than sex is for vampires, then maybe it's even more boundary breaking or crossing the line here to drink your like for the mother to drink the son's blood than is for the mother to sleep with the son. Like I don't know, like on the tiers of vampire lust, like, you know, drinking blood may be even worse, you know, or even more salacious, right? Which is interesting. And he says how like, you know, they rode the edges of our pact, the pact to like, you know, not you know, get too close with each other. So that's interesting. We'll see where that goes. And now we're going to another major reveal that like I feel like is, I don't think in the books, where there in reality the hotel or the venue or the hotel they were at, the party they were at last time, Dracula's Daughter Hotel, that was owned or is owned by Louis. And so, you know, they're going over like the damages and stuff, you know, that, you know, the two lawyers here, they each have their own lawyer. And so it's pretty much like almost like an excuse for Louis to have a conversation with Lestat, you know, mediated through the lawyers here. And they're just kind of like laying out their grievances and their petty squabbles between exes, pretty much. And it is a fun scene. You know, Louis is kind of like, again, in this modern times, kind of representative of the cool capitalist vampire, you know? Like, he's always been like, you know, a businessman, man, like in the previous season, right? You know, with his brothel business. And then like, you know, but now like in this modern times, he's expanded to own all these different businesses, right? He's an art seller. Even like Armand called him the first capitalist vampire or something back in last season. And so now he's like, you know, he has all these businesses, these hotels and clubs, probably, and other stuff. Of course, Lestat didn't know that Louis owned it, but you know, here he is, and again, like even later on, he realizes that Louis reveals that he knows it wasn't really Lestat's fault. It was the Fang gang's fault. So again, I think this is just an excuse for Louis to get a one-on-one with Lestat here. You know, and you know, he almost like reveals some of this stuff to like, just to upset Lestat, like saying that like Armand would write on each other's backs and pretend not to know what they were writing, even though they can read their minds, each other's minds, and stuff like that, like little things that lovers do just to upset Lestat. Yeah, so this is fun scene. Like also, like, you know, he's in a relationship. They're both kind of like casually sleeping with their lawyers, which is interesting. But he's gonna go see Lestat in his next show here. Another reason that he's here. So this is a cool scene here. This musical number, I like this song, but it feels like they could have spent a little more time here. I mean, each episode, I wonder if they'll do like a little musical scene each episode, a new song for each episode. That'd be kind of cool. Last episode we got like 2 or 3 songs, but I wouldn't mind like them leaning more into the musical element of it, kind of like, you know. And even this like reminded me, this song, you know, remind me a little bit of like Frankenfurter and Rocky Horror Picture Show, like the emotional song at the end of that movie. Like this is probably one of the more poignant songs we've seen so far. Definitely giving him an opportunity to connect with Louis here. And I would have liked to see a little more of it. And he does his special vampire trick here where he stops time. I suspect people are just seeing him flash in and out of on stage and probably thinks it's like a trick of the light or something. But he gets this moment, private moment, where he reveals all his notes he took on the book and stuff, that he's, all the lies and stuff. And Gabriella, of course, notices here. So this is interesting. Does Louis know about Gabriella yet? I feel like he doesn't, right? But could this lead to a sort of love triangle confrontation in the future? I suspect so. But yeah, this is a beautiful scene. Like it just looks really good. I mean, obviously, Lestat and glitter and shirtless, but also the lighting as well. Yeah, good stuff. We'll see where that goes. And then, of course, we get to the other major thing, really that connects Louis Daniel to this season much more than I think perhaps the books, because the books it's pretty much just a Lestat story. Here they're trying to Daniel and Lestat. Of course, Daniel in the concert he kind of telepathically sets up a meeting with Louis here, and so they're kind of like trying to maybe at least Daniel's trying to like get, be on Louis' good side again. But of course, Louis is still mad that he published the book without consulting him. And makes him out to be a liar and stuff like that. And another interesting thing here is that Louis mentions that he saw someone that looked very much like Claudia, So obviously Claudia is still on his mind. I suspect we'll see Claudia again, if not in flashbacks, and maybe as a ghost or something. I believe the actress for Claudia has been as part of the press tour. I think she's been interviewed along with other actors. So I think we're gonna see her again. And that'd be cool. Interesting thing though, he says that he's like someone that looked like her or whatever, and like as if she was in her 20s or something. So that could be a cool way of like keeping the actor that plays Claudia as part of this series. And continuing to age her up as she ages, depending on how long the series goes for. It may not make much of a difference, but it'd be a cool way to show to stop pretty much not having her to like always be represented and dressed like a young, but was she 15 when she got turned? And in this episode, in this adaptation, like, because if she shows up as a ghost, she could like as a ghost project herself to be older, as she always wanted to be, because she of course resents the fact that she's stuck in a child's body the whole time. So that could be interesting. But really the main thing here is that maybe perhaps because of some contract with the book publishing, but Telemasca still has some control over Daniel Malloy here. He's doing some work for them, and one of those tasks is to get Louis to meet here so that the Telemasca agents can come by. And so of course we get Riley and James show up here, and the real Rashid, which we'll get to in the final scene. But first, we got to finish up with the mother and son bonding scenario here. She's starting to understand a little bit the relationship between him and Louis here. That's gonna come into play. I imagine it's coming up in the next few episodes. But First, Lestat does his French singing here to reminisce about the making of the Vampiress Gabriella. So again, we're hopping about a lot between the past and the present, and we're skipping some stuff, right? It's like we don't, we're not, you didn't even get to see Lestat get turned by Magnus. We saw some flashes of it last episode, but I suspect we're gonna bounce back and forth in this season, um, um, in a non-linear fashion, right? And so we get the moments here where I think he's already in Paris. So like in the book, from what I read, Lestat goes to Paris with Nikki. This is Nikki from we saw in last season, his first real lover, really, right? And it's like not super explicit in the books, but it's pretty clear that him, like, they go to they I think they go to bed together in the same bed. They like, there's moments of them kissing, but you can interpret that them as just like kissing on the cheek or something. But I think they're gonna make it more evident in here in the show that they were lovers here, Nikki and Lestat. But so they go to Paris because even like the mother tells them, because the mother of course is like saying she's dying, right? That was a big thing in that previous scene. Did I mention that she mentions she's dying in this scene? Like that felt like a little bit abrupt here, because in the book it was like it was different. I think 2 or 3 different scenes. But so so she's so she's dying there. And so she says to him in the book, like, "Oh, I want you to be in Paris and live out your dreams, pretty much. And like, I want to die knowing that you're in Paris, And so that's where he goes with Nikki. And so, and in these flashbacks, we're seeing that I think she probably visits him, as she's sick, and it's pretty quick here, but we get the general idea what's going on here. I wonder if we'll see more of this in the coming episodes. We don't really need to, because we kind of get the idea. Like, it's kind of clear what's happening here. Like, she's coughing up blood, and then she gives him his blood. She bites him. He bites her, and then she turns to a vampire, and then we get her feeding here and stuff. And they get their revenge. And now that they're all powerful, they were kind of like, outcast in the family, but now they have the power. So now they can fulfill their dreams that they've mentioned before and kill the rest of the family. And they feel all powerful. And it's pretty gruesome. And the kids, of course, are away. They come back, and we hear those screams as we see the bloody faces of mother and son here. Now, again, showcasing more of that gray area. This seems pretty evil, though, to leave the bodies there for the kids to see. It seems that Lestat is a lot more conflicted about it than Gabriella. Definitely in this here, Gabriella's sleeping sound. Here, Lestat, I feel like is definitely conflicted, while if it's in fact I'm pretty sure that the music he was playing, which was in French, we don't get any subtitles, but is referencing that night, then I imagine Gabriella is also thinking of that night at this moment, but she seems to be content with it, and so and of course we did see that here, like the waiting staff is all dead. And I imagine it wasn't a very busy night. I wonder if Christine, the lawyer, is gonna make some uproar about it next episode. But But again, showcasing that like this is not the goody two shoes vampire that is more, or not like the not so much the empathetic Lestat that we may see in the books. At least that's how he describes himself, more like in the Vampire Lestat. He seems to be a little bit more morally gray here. But seemingly, you know, on the gooder side than his mother, it would appear. So, and that's probably going to lead to some conflict coming up, I suspect. And of course, you know, we're gonna, you know, it is, you know, it is still, he's still trying to make the case here that that it's okay that like he's sleeping with his mother, or at least in this relationship, right? We've seen at this point now, we've seen their connection. We understand how they feel bonded to each other. You know, they were both the outcasts of the family. And now they're vampires, of course, together, and she's the only one really that has known him for this long, right? So they definitely have that special bond. And he talks about here again, trying to justify it, like comparing this to Noah and stuff, and how like oh yeah, like in the olden times, you know, it wasn't that big of a deal in the 18th century with Noah, from biblical Noah, etc. You could probably also apply it to Adam and Eve or whatever. Like all these stories, like at some point in the past, there was incest, and maybe even in your family tree, right? You know, that was especially more common, you know, back in antiquity. And so that's what he's trying to say here, right? Like it's not, you know, it's not that weird, right? But even that, he can't quite even convince himself entirely, because then he says, he's just like, oh fuck it, you know, it's just vampire things. He says it's different for vampires, that's it. You know, so he's kind of like conceding the fact that like people who are listening, whether it's on the album record that he sold at the auction, or, you know, people listening to the TV show, I guess, that yeah, it's weird and awkward, and but it's because we're vampires, and it's different vampires because we're immortal beings, and you know, we were lonely vampires, and so in a way, it's kind of like a sort of a cop out way of like not really delving too much deeper into the incest thing. But also it's, you know, it's kind of like there has to be a way that the as the character justifies it, and it's just that it's because vampires, in order for us to like kind of move forward, and also like to adapt the story, because I'm pretty sure that's I think in the story, I mean, again, I haven't read all of it so far, but I'm not sure if it's as explicitly incestuous. I know that like there's passages where he describes a mother as like a beautiful, and he's like loves looking at her and stuff, and so it's implied that the love there is implied, that it's beyond just motherly love. So I'm curious to see, you know, how different it is as I read along from the novels. But yeah, we'll see. Like I feel like I'm hoping we see more of it. I feel like this is like kind of like a primer to like their relationship, and I suspect we will, because we'd have seen scenes of him and Magnus, so I suspect we'll flash back to the point where he becomes a vampire. So we'll see that relationship with him and Magnus, and we'll probably, I imagine, go back to this sequence of him, you know, turning his mother. And as we build that relationship in the past and in the present as well, I think it becomes a little bit more palatable, the their connection with each other, right? And it's starting to get there. So we'll see where it goes. You know, once the season completes, so we'll get a better idea of whether of how much sense this relationship really makes sense. You know, so then we get to the final sequence here that again brings Louis back into the picture here and connects the storylines from the first season. I don't know. Again, I don't know how much this is. I feel like this is probably very different in the books, of course. But the idea here is that what they want Louis to do is they want him to get rid of the vampire gang that's become a nuisance in, I think, Detroit and probably the Midwestern area. Raglan James here is like, oh, like, you're very good at dispatchment. You're very good at, getting rid of these vampires. We saw, of course, in Paris, the climax of the last season, him getting rid of all the drama vampires at the Theater of Vampires. Like, that was pretty wild, violent killing spree. That was Louis that was really good at that. and then here, the real Rashid, who I guess this is the first time he's revealing to Louis that he's part of Talamasca. He mentions that, like, in the buy he also killed like 30 something other vampires, I think. Because at the end of last season, of course, Louis like telepathically calls out to the vampires, and it's like, hey, I'm here. My windows are unlocked or whatever he said. Like, come and get me if you want, whatever. And so, like, he kind of invited, anybody to come, after the review of the book and everything, right? And so we would assume that Bunch did come and did answer his call, and he had to get rid of them, at least 31. He says 32. He includes Agent Talbot, who is a reference to some character in the book. I don't know. From what I've read, he's like part of Talamasca, so maybe he's that character's no longer going to show up, or maybe he'll show up later. But I think that might be an Easter egg for book readers. But I am curious to see if they'll incorporate characters from the actual Talamasca TV show that they did, which they canceled. I talked a little bit about this last time. They canceled, so the storyline kind of goes unresolved. Raglan James there, like, was last seen with the case full of old vampire blood. And then there were some characters that were going off on some mission. I think they were sailing across the sea to look for more vampires or something. And there was like a few vampires in that show. And I think that probably takes place around this time, right? So, like, you would think that those characters might show up. Maybe they'll tidy that storyline up in this season or next season. Perhaps maybe when the big violent climactic battle happens between vampires, perhaps Akasha shows up and kills off those characters. I don't know. Well, I'm wondering where that's going to lead, but definitely Raglan James is an important character, it seems, because he is a big character in the Body Thief book that takes place after the Queen of the Damned, and I think they want to do that too. So we'll see where that ends up. But yeah, so basically the big thing really is that, like, the leader of this Fang gang, this gang of Detroit vampires, is in fact Killer / Bruce, and that's what actually gets Louis to pay attention. It's like, oh, he's the leader, the guy who raped Claudia in season 1, and so now he has to take him out to avenge Claudia, and that's where all these plot lines are going to converge, right? I imagine maybe this is going to lead to a big fight at the end of the season. Maybe with a little bit of tease of Akasha, if not in the past, maybe she'll show up at the end. But I suspect the Akasha Queen of the Damned thing is probably next season. They are mixing up different things, from my understanding. I know, last couple seasons was the first book split into two. They might, I don't know if they'll do the same for Lestat, because it seems that they're going to focus a lot of the present time, and I think more in the book it's only like the bookend in the beginning or the present timeline, and I feel like, my understanding, Queen of the Damned, there's more present stuff, so I think they'll just probably have this be the Vampire Lestat, and the next season will be Queen of the Damned, and then the final season will probably be the Tale of the Body Thief, which is like the fourth book, right? So we'll see how they all go along. But I am enjoying how they're showing a lot of the modern timeline stuff, and I think it's good that they're connecting it with the previous seasons with this adaptation here, with this with the Bruce character, who I think is a sort of gang leader in the books, but maybe not specifically this Detroit leader of the Detroit gang, or at least this Fang gang. And he did say Fang gang, kind of funny. Like, I think Claudia had that idea when they were talking at the campfire at the fire there in the previous seasons, and so I wonder if, like, I think what would be a rewarding arc perhaps would be like Louis and Lestat reconciling together as they're about to fight Bruce. Like they're like, okay, we have to avenge our daughter Claudia, so let's join up, let's let be, bygones be bygones, and like just get rid of this Bruce guy, and then maybe that's how they'll connect, at the end of the season or something. And then we'll see. Then the next season will be the whole vampire apocalypse or something. Like, and they did mention early on, of course, the first scene, that there's going to be that scenario with that's going to lead to like a bunch of people with the Y chromosome being killed off, so there's some kind of vampire plan, perhaps from Akasha, to like get rid of the men in on Earth or something. Something's going on, right? So I don't know if that'll be addressed this season or next season, but and that's going to be and that takes place before the opening scene of this season, at the auction. And I don't think Lestat's dead, but because his stuff is being auctioned, that somewhat implies that he's dead or missing or something. But I feel like he's just probably on the run or something, or hiding. And I suspect he's not going to be killed off. But when will we get back to that scene at the end of the season or next? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, overall, I did like this episode. I'm liking the Rockstar Lestat stuff. Like I said, I like that they're spending a good amount of time here, and connecting these characters like Daniel and Louis to the season, because I do like those characters. I would miss them too much if they weren't here and it was just solely Lestat this whole season. And yeah, like the mother and son thing is interesting. We'll see where it goes to. Curious to see Nikki. I think that's a next time. We'll see the Nikki stuff. Oh wait, the video just kind of stopped. Hold on a second. Oh, I was just talking and the video wasn't even going. One second. I guess it doesn't matter too much. So yeah, that's episode 2 of the Vampire Lestat. Let me know what you think. I'll probably be back next week with some more talking about the new episode, next episode, episode 3. Yeah. What are your thoughts? Until then, I'll see you next time. Bye bye.